Hello everybody and welcome back to the Silicon Nubian YouTube channel where we're all about things tech. Today, continuing on our series of 10 minutes with Linux, we're going to take a look at a very interesting Linux distribution, one which you may find is something you want to try out or maybe even put into as a daily driver. We're looking at Solus Linux version 4.1 Fortitude. Solus Linux is a distribution that was built from the ground up. It was built from scratch. It uses a forked version of the PySci package manager which is maintained within Solus as EO package or EOPKG, and by default the main release uses a custom desktop environment called Budgie, which was also developed in-house. By the way, Budgie is now available on different Linux distributions. Just goes to show you that they did create a good thing, and other Linux distributions have taken it up. Solus does come in a number of other editions, including Mate, for example, and Plasma, I believe, and i3, all these different graphic GUIs, different editions that ship, and there's slight differences in the software that is available, but not that much. What does Solus claim to fame? Quite a simple, stark looking desktop, which I love it. Great out-of-box experience. Gaming support has been improved via the improvements in something called eSync support. By default, applications that are included will include Firefox, and this is for all editions, Libreoffice and Thunderbird. So right out of the bat, we're talking about a distribution that you can become very productive with post-installation. Today we're looking again at the version with Budgie, which is their in-house design and built desktop environment. So let's start our timer and let's get going. One good thing about this version of Solus is it does ship with a very modern 5X series kernel, so up-to-date graphics cards and CPUs such as 3rd gen Ryzen processors, for example the 3600, 3900X, which is in this system, and also AMD up-to-date graphics cards such as the 5700 series, 5700 XT, NVIDIA RTX series cards such as the 2080 Ti. They're all supported. Intel's new Comet Lake, Ice Lake CPUs. Out of the box, the included kernel, it does ship with version 5.4.12, enables support for all of these of the latest hardware, so that's great to know. Mesa has been updated, of course, accordingly. Another thing that I noticed is right after startup, my usual habit is to perform a system update, make sure everything's up to date prior to filming these videos. And I noticed that the installation, one thing that I took away from it was that the downloads are just like everyone else. It's dependent on your internet speeds. But when it came to actually unpackaging or the packages, installing the packages, things went very quickly. And I just noticed this anecdotally, but when I looked at the documentation only afterwards, I realized that Solus uses Z standard as a form of compression, ZSTD, as opposed to SquashFS images. Well, Z standard images are slightly larger, but they result in a 3 to 4 times speed in terms of decompression. And I just noticed that anecdotally prior to actually doing any installs. So it seems like it's something that's a definite plus, particularly a distribution that's updated quite often. Now let's move on to what we see. This is the stark blank desktop that we get post boot up. And if you followed some of my videos, you know that I'm a fan of this. I like molding and shaping my Linux distributions, my desktop environments, much like you would Play-Doh as a child. So let's look at what we have here. Right-clicking on the desktop brings up a very simple dialog box where we can change the backgrounds, which is done in real time with a nice fade in. Very nicely done. Very, very nicely done. Or we can go to the display, and this is the general settings manager, which I'll go through. A very, very nice application for using a GUI to adjust all kinds of critical and non-critical settings within your distribution. And we can go to the general settings box straight away. So let's watch. We can't do really much on the desktop. One thing about Budgie is it is simple in its approach, but powerful in its execution, if that makes sense. Let's go down. So we have our toolbar, there's nothing we can do down here. Right or left clicking doesn't bring up any options whatsoever. That's done within the settings. Here we have our notification panel. So it shows us our running applets, which we have right here. No apps are running sound, but the sound applet is running. We have our calendar, and we have our general notifications. Here, because this system is on a UPS, it's we can show our battery status. And here we have our sound. Interestingly, right-clicking on any of these icons as opposed to other desktop environments doesn't do anything. If we left-click, we get all the action. So here we have sound. We can go to our sound settings, which once again is part of this general sound setting dialog box we're going to go into. So we have a lot of options here that we can do, and all the options that you would actually really need for general day-to-day computing. Different alert sounds we can have. I'm sure we can modify that as well. And here we have the power, where we can lock, suspend, and whatnot. And of course the calendar that we saw before, and we have our preferences. So let's go to the left side. Once again, right or left clicking on the panel doesn't bring up anything, and that's done elsewhere. Now if we go on the left side, we have the default music player, which is Rhythmbox. Those who've been in Linux for a while know Rhythmbox has been around for quite a while. GNOME software. Rhythmbox 3.4.4, very capable audio media player. Here we have the video player, which is GNOME MPV, another capable video player. Please note that that as with any Linux, you can install whatever you want as long as it's available in the repositories, and we're going to go through that if what you see is not exactly the applications you're used to using. The default web browser is Firefox, which gets 2 thumbs up from me. I don't really have a favorite browser. Actually, I do. It's Opera. But I do use interchangeable with Firefox, and to a lesser extent, but still, I also use Chrome, which is available in the repositories, by the way. And here we have the simple file manager that they use. And it's, like I said, it looks very much like Thunar. It goes and does everything that you'd want it to do in terms of file manager, so that's great to have there. Now let's take a look quickly at our software center. Now this is interesting. The software center, from the start, I'm going to tell you that with respect to available software in terms of numbers, Solus may not have as much as, for example, Debian. Debian's on the other end of the spectrum in terms of software availability, or even Ubuntu, for example. But what Solus does have is very well thought out selection of software, and they don't have, their software section is not small by any means. But let's go through this software center. Now here we can go through the different categories, which are also divided into more subcategories. We can look at the updates that are available. When I did start up the system, it did tell me that updates were available, and you can install them from here. By default, there's 3 categories of updates: critical, software, security. I'm not sure if I remember correctly, and only one was selected as being critical at the moment, but I selected all 3, updated everything. Your installed software, which obviously is quite extensive and sometimes a little cryptic. Third-party software is available. These are software that probably have a non-open source component to them, so they're considered third-party, such as Flash, for example. Google Chrome, interesting that it's there. But there's some very well-known software in here. We have Spotify, TeamViewer, Viber. So things that are very well-known, they're in here, so you're not going to be left out in the cold by installing Solus as your OS. We can search for software here, and we have our settings, so we can see automatically check for updates every hour, and they are divided into security and core, but all updates by default, the all updates is selected. So let's look a little bit about the software. For example, if I go into Office software, then I have subcategories: ebook, PDF viewing, Office software. So I have Abbey Word available to me. By default, OpenOffice is installed, as we'll see. I have a lot of different software here that I can install. Document processor, and all the supporting files are here as well. Now if I go back, I can go into text editors, and you can see that we do have a number. Now it's not pages and pages long, But realistically, how many text editors do you really need? Please don't flame me on that. We have financial software, home bank, K My Money, and a bunch of different things that we can select from a number of different things. Of course, we have security software with 3 categories, security applications, and we have quite a number of them as well. So that's how it works, and we could always search if we want. For example, and it will give us a list. But if you just type in something like Chrome, the list can be a little bit over the top in terms of what you're looking at. You'd want to be a little bit more specific. So that's the Software Center. Pretty good, pretty good. Again, what impresses me about Solus and their approach to Linux is simplicity yet power. And they seem to be skirting that fine line very well. Okay, so let's go into what can you expect to be installed post-installation. So accessories includes your calculator, your file manager, of course, and they have a password and key manager, which is great, especially these days when everything has a password. I mean, even my fridge probably has a password, who knows. Graphics include document viewer, we have a basic image viewer, GNOME image viewer. So it uses a lot of GNOME applications. And we have photos, LibreOffice Draw. Again, internet, we have Firefox, HexChat, and Thunderbird. Not much to speak of in terms of the number of software selections. For example, this is completely polar opposite to what we see presented in PC Linux OS with respect to the amount of software included. Office, we have the whole LibreOffice suite, or most of it, which is very nice to know, because right away, and there goes our 10 minutes. Give me another 2. We're going to be done really soon. So LibreOffice by default is included, which I really applaud. Sound and video. Again, we have a video player. We have an audio player. That is all. Everything else you can put in what you want via the manager. Software manager. System settings. Of course, we have the about, and it goes to the main system settings application, which we're going to go through right now. So this is the main system settings application. Make that a little bit bigger so that it's not so hard to see. There we go. Now, this is tells us about our Solus Linux install, what we're running on, and whatnot. In terms, we can go through network. We have a lot of things we can do. Well, it doesn't look like a lot, but it's just laid out in such a way that we can do. There are a lot of settings hidden under a very simple facade here. So we have Bluetooth settings, we have our backgrounds, which you went through, our notifications, which applications can make notifications, we can turn on Do Not Disturb, search, of course, and then we have our application profiles, and we can do different things with respect to their notifications and whatnot. Continue, privacy, we can, no applications, ask which applications I've used for the camera or the microphone. That's pretty good. Many times applications will ask for things and we don't know why, and we don't know because it's in the background. We have sharing in terms of screen sharing, sound, power, displays we went through, mouse and touchpad, keyboard shortcuts, printers, removable media, color, region and language, universal access. So we have a lot of settings for universal access, which I like. Not for myself, but some of my friends and my clients. We have our user manager here, default applications, date and time, and about, as we saw before. So a pretty comprehensive universal spot for settings within the Budgie Linux itself. So that's pretty good. And we can actually access them from different places. So that's pretty good. I really like that. Very much like how it's laid out so far. And if we continue, we have our software center. Of course, we have Wi-Fi we can configure right there. And this is another settings manager. This is the Budgie Desktop settings. I'm sorry I've gone over a little bit, but this distribution does deserve a little bit more than 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to get out of here in another minute or so. So the Budgie Desktop, while simple in appearance, does have a lot of configuration options. So we can change the view of our widgets, our icons. We have different themes we can use. cursors, desktop. Did you notice that there's no desktop icons? Because by default, desktop icons are turned off. We can easily turn them on and drag and drop if we want to, and put our icons on our desktop if we wish. Add a shortcut to our home directory, but we'd have to turn this on first. There's our home directory. We can see it pop up. There's our network servers, trash, mounted volumes pop up, but there's no mounted volumes now. And we could go in our trash. We can see that I do have something in there, and we can always empty our trash very quickly. So desktop icon support is there. You just have to go and turn it on. Number of virtual desktops are 4. We can reduce that, so we can have our number of virtual desktops. I personally only need around 2. I never really need 4. Fonts, then again, I have a million folders on my desktop open at a time. So we can choose our fonts. I've increased the size of the fonts for the sake of this video. Raven, we have a support of different widgets. We can change a few settings, what's available. Allow raising volume over 100%, enable display week numbers and calendar. We can have change our window behavior right here, night mode, tiling, automatic, button layout. And then we have our bottom panel. We can actually choose a new applet to add to the panel, so it's very configurable. We can create a new panel, and we can go into auto start apps we can add. For example, I could have Firefox at startup. So that's our 10 minutes with Linux for Solus 4.1. I am very interested in this desktop. It seems to me to walk the fine line between form and functionality. It includes just the right amount of software necessary to become extremely productive right after installation. You may not even have to install anything else. If you just want to install and go, Budgie's good for that. Absolutely, Budgie's good for that. Performance-wise, I'd give it in between PC Linux OS and then the speed daemon, which is MX Linux. Not as fast. Then again, I am running in a virtual environment, but extremely quick. Again, I am running on a pretty high-end system, and it's very quick in a virtual environment. I have not had a chance to put this on real hardware, but the reports I've heard is the performance is excellent. In terms of memory use, it's actually not that bad. Now, I could say, some people might say, well, what's not that bad? Well, what I see in System Monitor is just with a few icons on the desktop. We're using 996 megs, just under a gig of memory. Before I did all of this, I checked before, I was using around 900 megs. So between 900 and 1 gig of RAM for a static desktop such as this is not bad today. It's not the best, but how many of us only have 1 or 2 gigs of RAM? I would say that Solus is best run on a middle range system. You could still run it on a Core 2 Duo. Just make sure to have between 2, preferably 4 gigs of RAM installed. You don't need a lot of processor power, which is absolutely dependent upon what you expect to do with your system. But that being said, it is not as frugal as MX Linux, but definitely will run on lower end systems. But given the kernel that's included, it's also geared towards high-end systems where it will run like a hot knife through butter. It will really cut through your task quite quickly. So that's our quick 10 minutes with Linux. Sorry, it went up to around 14 minutes, but I did think that Budgie did deserve a little bit more time. Interesting how a Linux distribution that on the outward looks so simple can actually be so complete and so worthy of extra time. But it is definitely, give it a try. Most definitely, I'd love to hear from people who have used it on actual hardware as opposed to in a virtual machine. And I want to thank you all for supporting the 10 Minutes with Linux initiative that I've started. And hopefully we'll see some more in the future. So take care. Please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up. Tell me what you'd like to see. If there's a Linux distribution that you'd like to include in this 10 Minutes with Linux series, I'd be more than happy to poke around at it. And I will see you all soon. Take care.